Good morning. You're watching Daybreak on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines this morning. The Nikkei falls more than 2% after Japan GDP contracts more than expected. Other Asian markets also start the week on a subdued note. Now, exit polls predict a Congress sweep in Rajasthan, project a fight to the finish in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, and TRS may hold or manage to hold on to Telangana, while Mizoram is looking set for a hung assembly. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and non-members, also known as OPEC Plus, decide to cut output by 1.2 million barrels a day in 2019. China has summoned the US ambassador in connection with the arrest of Huawei's chief financial officer. And former chief economic advisor Arvind Subramanian expects the universal basic income proposal to be part of all party manifestos heading into the general election. That's a Bloomberg Quint exclusive. Now on to action from Wall Street, and what a session it was. US stocks saw their worst week since March this year, led by a sell-off in technology shares. Abigail Doolittle wraps up all that transpired during that sell-off in Friday's session.
Stocks traded sharply lower in Friday's Wall Street session, ending the worst week for U.S. stocks since March. Now, on Friday, we did have the Dow, the S&P 500, and the Nasdaq all declined by between 2.2% and 3%. Again, very bearish action there, supported by the sector composition for the S&P 500. 10 of the 11 S&P 500 sectors did finish down. In fact, 9 of those sectors finishing down with a loss of 1% or more. The worst sector, technology, down 3.5%, weighed on by lots of the big names, including Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Intel, Cisco, all down more than 3.5%. And there didn't appear to be a specific catalyst behind this selling action. Rather, similar to lots of the other volatile days that we've seen recently, perhaps an unleashing of some of the pent-up energy on the year after the big rally in 2016 and 2017, a bit of an undoing of it. Perhaps that rally was too far, too fast, and now we're seeing investors wanting out of stocks and risk assets, in fact. But one risk asset that traded higher on the day, oil, up more than 1%. This after OPEC did agree to a bigger than expected supply cut than expected, agreeing to remove 1.2 million barrels from the market. But interestingly, at the highs, up more than 5%. So oil finished off the highs. So the stock market sell-off that we saw on Friday, similar to so many other days, while oil was higher, well off the highs, it points to the idea that this is a risk asset sell-off because oil had a bullish catalyst, and even so, finishing well off the highs. It'll be very interesting, of course, to see what next week brings after the worst week for U.S. stocks since March. In New York, Abigail Doolittle, Bloomberg News.
On to other updates from the international space. China's leadership is trying to strike a delicate balance between outrage and necessity as it seeks to maintain a recent thaw with the United States while lashing out at the arrest of a top Chinese tech executive. Unlike a new round of tariffs or more tough rhetoric from American officials, the detention of Huawei's chief financial officer appears to have driven home the intensifying rivalry between the US and China. Bloomberg's Stephen Engel has all the details in this report.
Chinese Foreign Ministry has summoned a U.S. ambassador to China, Terry Branstad. These typically are tongue lashings by the Chinese Foreign Ministry to the ambassadors who have to sit there, take the tongue lashing, and then go back, of course, to their embassies. And on Saturday, the Canadian ambassador to Beijing also was summoned to the Foreign Ministry. We had a statement from the ministry saying the actions by the United States have violated the, quote, legitimate rights and interests of Chinese citizens and are extremely bad in nature. A similar statement when they summoned the Canadian ambassador said it was vile in nature and also threatened Canada with grave consequences if this court proceeding against Meng Wanzhou continues. They also threatened further action if necessary to the United States if they pursue legal action against Sabrina Meng Wanzhou, of course, Sabrina being her English name. So we don't know what those further actions might be.
All right, uncertainty there, but it's very clearly a weak start for Asian markets this morning. Let's go straight to Bloomberg's Rosalind Chin, who's joining us live from the Hong Kong studios. Well, clear signs there. Can you give us a little bit of the fine print there, Rosalind?
I think investors in this region really looking for something to help boost sentiment, but there isn't a lot to be found. We've been talking about the Huawei case. Those and trade overtones, of course, continue to dominate in this region and, of course, around the world as well. Of course, we've also had some other wider issues coming out. So, for example, not that stellar US job numbers coming out on Friday, as was mentioned. We've also had uncertainty over whether the Fed's going to cut politically, changes at the White House, the Chief of Staff on their way out as well. And also, you know, on Tuesday, the UK's House of Commons is going to have a very crucial vote on Brexit. So none of these factors really helping investors find any positivity as we come in towards the end of the year. So markets across Asia definitely firmly in the red today. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index down by more than 1%. We've got the Hang Seng down 1%, the Nikkei down by 1.8%. The Nikkei, we did see some numbers on GDP from Japan, revised third quarter numbers coming out earlier today. And we saw, as was mentioned, that GDP contracted more than expected. That, of course, is having an impact as well, with business sentiment, of course, not great in the region either. China, the yuan has been weakening. Australia's ASX 200, that dropped to a 2-year low. Of course, again, trade issues are coming into play as well. So as we approach the end of the year, everyone is starting to ask, where is this Santa Claus rally? Is it actually ever going to emerge? At one point, we thought maybe yes, but now I think investors are starting to question whether this is actually going to emerge at all this year. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Rosalind. Well, let's turn to India, where, well, clearly the cues aren't looking very good for the start of the week. Darshan Mehta is joining me now to tell you all about the trade setup for the day and also what's happening in the futures and options space. Well, Darshan, after that weak close on Wall Street, there's also weakness in Asia this morning. How are we looking?
So what has happened, Alex, is that the Dow was down 550 points. And with this drop that's come in the last 3 days, it's dropped 1,500 points, which means all the gains that it had for the entire year, now they are out of the window. So Dow is now in negative territory for a YTD basis. And that's also affected all of the Asian markets. The SGX Nifty is currently indicating a downtick of almost 116 points. So we will open close to the 10,600 mark in trade. So there is clear weakness that we can see. Most of the ADRs also ended with a negative bias. You could see the drop that came in Vedanta, Tata Motors, Infosys. So all these companies which have heavy focus on overseas markets, they saw selling that came in. In fact, all the ADRs ended with a negative bias. So there was sort of selling traction that was there in the market. How did we end on Friday? Surprisingly, we ended on the positive note for the Nifty. It was up almost 0.8%. Let's pull up the Nifty Bank, which was up almost 1.5%. The Nifty PSU Bank was flat in trade. So it was basically the Nifty, which a couple of stocks on the Nifty, which led the rally. Now, a couple of sectors which managed to move the needle. The media index was up almost 0.9%, given the fact that Z did well in trade. And on the other hand, you had counters like the metal index, which continued to bleed. It was down by almost 0.5%. So there was selling that's happening across commodities now. Now, FI sold in 817 crores. DI has bought in almost 242 crores in the cash market. Apart from it, if you're looking at the other traction, how did the Nifty end up? It was up almost 90 points. And basically, the prime reason why it did well and the Nifty Bank did well was the big 10% jump that came in Kotak Mahindra Bank. Not the largest of weight on the Nifty, but nevertheless, the large weights did contribute. Reliance, ICICI Bank and Infosys. And that is why, because of Kotak and ICICI Bank, the Nifty Bank managed to outperform in trade. What didn't do well? HCL Tech, the acquisition weighing in on the company. Sun Pharma again continues to fall. And the others, GAIL and NTPC, have a rather small weightage on the Nifty. And that's why, because of a few 4-5 counters, the Nifty managed to move up by almost 90 points. How did it pan out on the F&O side of the market? Obviously, if you're looking at the Nifty futures, we were close to the 10,700 mark in trade. Fresh buying was seen on open interest build-up of almost 3% in trade. The other factor is how did the Nifty Bank pan out in trade? 11% open interest, and it gained up almost 1.5%. And this was on account of Kotak Mahindra Bank as well as ICICI Bank. The other factors that you need to watch out, how is positioning happening. Put writers are active from 10,500 right up to levels of 10,700. Call writers are active from 10,700 right up to 11,000. So 10,500 to 11,000 is the broad level. Now, put writers are active at 10,600, 700 and 800. With the gap down of 120 points on the SGX Nifty, it indicates that the Nifty will open close to 10,600 mark in trade. So all these red lines will go down and the green lines will come up. And that, if you see what happened on Friday, it will be the exact opposite what happened since the market. So pull up where open interest change happened and what happened on Friday. And you will see there put writers became aggressive because the Nifty managed to move up and call writers was seeing position shed. Now the exact reverse will happen in trade today. As far as the stocks in the F&O band is concerned, there is no stock in the F&O band. The Nifty PCR managed to move up. The Bank Nifty PCR also managed to move up. It's again come above the 1 level in mark, given the fact that there was strong traction on the Nifty Bank. Stocks that you need to watch out for in trade: high open interest build-up in Muthoot Finance. Numbers came out on Thursday post market, just during market hour closing. It reacted negatively, but once the numbers were analyzed, there was fresh buying that was seen. Open interest build-up of 54%. HCL fell in trade because of the acquisition. Oil India was weak in trade, while Kotak Mahindra Bank saw fresh buying. Look at the open interest build-up of almost 9%. The other stocks that you need to watch out in trade were the counters in which there was an open interest decline. So there was PTC, which saw short covering. There was DCB Bank, which saw short covering. ICICI Prudential managed to see short covering because of the data that came out in terms of the insurance trends that came in. Amara Raja Batteries as well as Torrent Pharma. Among it, Torrent Power was the only one that saw long unwinding. Apart from it, the other counters saw short covering in itself.
All right, thanks so much for that, Darshan. Well, let's move to one of the big updates from last week, but Friday, and post-market hours for us, so important nonetheless. Oil producers have agreed to cut production by 1.2 million barrels a day from 2019. The OPEC and non-members arrived at a consensus on late Friday evening, spurring crude prices for a short while, as the quantum of the cut was higher than anticipated. Russia, which was instrumental in deciding the size of the cut, believes that this should be enough to address oversupply concerns in 2019. Russian Energy Minister Alexander Novak spoke to Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Horden. Listen in.
As of now, the decision is made for 6 months. If needed, if we see that the market needs this cut to continue, we could extend it. We'll have this option. But at the same time, if we see that the market needs more oil, we have all the instruments in place to make adjustments. We're flexible.
And Bloomberg's Aaron Clark sums up what the other oil producers had to say after the decision was made.
This deal caught a lot of people by surprise. Again, the OPEC Plus group, which includes Russia, said they would cut production by 1.2 million barrels a day starting next year for 6 months. I think, initially a lot of people didn't think this would happen. Saudi Arabia's Energy Minister Khalid Al-Falih said on Thursday, he was very dubious that a deal would get done. But then once they announced the deal, the agreement on Friday, prices really jumped. Brent jumped as much as 6% to around $64 a barrel before pairing those gains and trading right around $61 a barrel. But I think that this deal really speaks to this growing, this deepening relationship between Saudi Arabia and Russia, two of the world's largest producers. They worked together on the earlier cuts that started in January of 2017 and lasted for about 18 months that really helped clear global inventories. And now they're going to do it again. Of course, it includes the other members of OPEC, and there were some exemptions for Libya, Iran, and Venezuela. But again, this really speaks to this growing dominance and growing relationship between Saudi Arabia and Russia, and they're really willing to work together to manage the oil market.
On to other updates. Former Chief Economic Advisor Arvind Subramanian expects to see proposals of the universal basic income in all party manifestos going to the elections next year. In conversation with Bloomberg Quint's Menaka Doshi at the launch of his book, Subramanian also highlighted how fiscally prudent this would be. Listen in.
My hunch or prediction is that every major party's manifesto will have some kind of universal basic income in it. I hope it'll happen. I think it'll happen, but I'm saying both a positive and a normative thing. The positive is a prediction that it will happen. I might be wrong on this. And the normative is that it would be very good, it could happen. Now, the thing here is that why I think I see future for this in India, the UBI, it's still not happened. First, I've actually spoken to a few chief ministers, very thoughtful chief ministers, who really like the idea. And for good reason, not for populist reason, but for good reason. I mean, I know, I don't want to name names. Actually, I've named him in the book. I mean, he said, look, this chief minister said, I have all this PDS, all this other social welfare thing. The thing just doesn't work. Leakage, whatever. I think UBI is promising. I think we don't have the infrastructure yet, but I think second thing is that, when I was in government, Kashmir Hasib Drabu was actually very seriously thinking about this. And what makes it such a tantalizing, exciting prospect in India is that the central government doesn't have to do it on its own. State governments can turn to the center and say, look, I want to do it. I will finance part of it, as indeed Jammu and Kashmir was willing to. I finance part of it, but the rest I want it from you, but I don't want new money from you. Whatever you're giving me as saying do it for this, this and the other, just untie that and allow me to use it. And if that dynamic takes hold, I think that the items in the manifesto can get translated into actual action over the next 5 years.
It's an extensive topic. I don't think we'll get to the heart of UBI in the next minute or two, but fiscally, is it a prudent thing to do? And if a state was going to get the benefit from having to implement this, will the centre actually consider a nationwide UBI next year, or believe that it might not give it the electoral currency that, you know, something like this should or would or could?
Actually, it goes back to the earlier points that we were discussing, that, you know, if the centre wants credit for it,
correct,
and if it promises it on its own, then the fiscal space would be a serious issue.
Right.
Then, of course, my favorite thing is that in the survey we said, even at the centre, there are so many subsidies and you know, kind of what we call bounties to the middle class that we give, which I think should be on the table, but I'm not that hopeful about.
Okay. So no fiscal space, according to you, but lots of political...
Yeah, I think the states can do it more because of this tied and untied aid. I think the centre can do a little bit because I think there is, I mean, the fertilizer subsidy, you know, my friend Bala is sitting here and he thinks I didn't work enough on the fertilizer subsidy, but I was obsessed with the fertilizer subsidy when I was in government because I think there's almost nothing that redeems this subsidy. You know, that's something that should go, and that can provide, and things like that can provide space.
You can watch that entire conversation, of course, on the website bloombergquint.com. But now let's turn to Yash Upadhyay, who is joining us with all the stocks in news. Good morning, Yash. What's on your list today?
Morning, Alex. Firstly, we are tracking Ashoka Buildcon, wherein the company has received a big 794 crore rupees order from the Rail Vikas Nigam for the construction and maintenance of rail project in Central East India. Escorts has completely moved out of its crane business, wherein they have sold its existing stake in its RT crane business to Japan-based Tadano Corporation for 35 crore rupees on a slump sale basis. Mangalam Drugs, as a small cap company, there the company has received the WHO approval for its Unit 1, so that would be a positive watch out for that one. IFCI came out with their Q2 numbers. They reported a negative net interest income of about 16 crore rupees versus a positive net interest income of 223 crores in the same quarter last year, and a standalone net loss of 16.5 crores versus a net loss of 294 crores. That apart, we'll be watching out for IOCL as well, when the company has said that it would consider the proposal of a share buyback and dividend at its board meeting on December 13th.
Thanks so much for that, Yash. Now, tomorrow is going to be a nail-biter if exit polls results are anything to go by. The Congress has apparently played catch-up with the BJP in at least 3 states, all of which are currently ruled by the BJP. That's according to a poll of polls. The Congress's newfound friendship with the TDP may not get the alliance over the bar in Telangana, but its exit polls, after all, based on a very small sample size. Tamanna Inamdar and Kaushik Vaidya wrap up all the key takeaways from that poll of polls. Now, before I say goodbye, there's a lot more on the website, so do check it out. After you're done with this, it starts with all you need to know.
Well, the exit polls, after the last vote has been cast, present a very interesting picture before result day, when we will know the outcome of elections in 5 states. Let's take a quick look first at what the key headlines are out of these exit polls. Here, Kaushik, I think important to note that we've picked a specific set of exit polls, narrowed it down, and this is the picture we've come up.
These are agencies that have carried out exit polls over a number of years, and those that have seemed to have had a sample size that's broad enough over the years to reach a point where you think that you can get that and put that to our viewers. 5 key points here. The first one is that in 2 of those states, the Congress is seen as getting to that halfway mark. That's Rajasthan and to an extent in Madhya Pradesh. Remember, these are both states that in 2013 the Congress lost very badly.
Yeah, and in Chhattisgarh is a very interesting situation where Raman Singh seems like he will scrape through once again. We'll come to all the details in that, but first the headlines very quickly. It also means that BJP could face a setback, a pretty huge one in the Hindi heartland of Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan, and the Congress may take away 2 of these 3 Hindi-speaking states, which will have a huge impact ahead of 2019. But let's come to Madhya Pradesh and we'll go through each of those sets in a bit of detail. Madhya Pradesh would be the big surprise because even a couple of months ago it seemed like Mamaji, Shivraj Singh Chauhan, would come through for a 4th term. The polls don't say that too clearly.
So let's look at them, right? Very quickly. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of them showing a healthy lead for the Congress. That halfway mark is 115, 116. There's only one that's giving the BJP a win, a clear win. The rest of them are showing the Congress ahead. So when you tally that up, it's showing the Congress and the BJP. Remember, this is an outlier number, which is what's skewing this towards.
You know, just a note, which is something you don't see in the graphic. Access My India shows pretty much the same header,
right.
But it gives a 1% extra vote share. They've done a vote share prediction as well. So they give 42% of the vote to the Congress and 41% to the BJP, which is why we're saying 3 out of 5 show a Congress win, 1 neck-to-neck position. It is something which will definitely make the BJP uncomfortable.
That's right. And any of the others are parties necessarily that you would think that are more amenable to the Congress's smaller parties than the BJP having run the state for the last 15 years.
Well, it's unlikely to come to a split verdict, but then we'll see how clear this is. Let's move on to Rajasthan. Now, Rajasthan, you know why I find Rajasthan very interesting, Kaushik, is because in the last week or so, there was this narrative that the BJP has managed to pull it back.
You did hear that because you heard of let the Prime Minister go in for his slogovers campaigning, for his carpet bombing of rallies that he's known to do in state after state. So you got the sense from BJP workers saying they were waiting for that to see if it could be clawed back. This is a state that was seen as one that was slipping out of the BJP's hands a few months ago. Raji did get her way in choice of candidates and things like who she wanted and how this election campaign should be run, and not from Delhi. But that said, those numbers are pretty evident.
Those numbers are actually very evident. There is only one poll, Jan Ki Baat, which is giving the BJP really a very marginal position and a lead over here with 83 to 103, which is a range. I've also noticed this time around, posters have been careful. I feel they've been careful.
That's right.
You know, where they're trying to show a direction but not sticking their necks out, and possibly because this is such a close contest.
Correct.
And such an important set of election numbers as well. Let's go to Chhattisgarh. Chhattisgarh is fascinating because in the last minute you had a googly of sorts with Ajit Jogi and Mayawati coming together for a combination. It seems to have not done much harm to the Congress or the BJP, but they could be seeing themselves in a very important role in a couple of these polls. At least the Jan Ki Baat one is one where they could have an important role.
One caveat about this, right? And you brought this up in the piece on BloombergQuint.com that you put up earlier this week, that the margin of vote share between the Congress and the BJP in Chhattisgarh has been very narrow. And for the last 3 elections in this state, for much of the day, you don't know who's winning in Chhattisgarh. But 2003, 2008, 2013, I can tell you that. Having watched that, you didn't know who was winning the state. And it's only in those last few rounds, watch for Tuesday, that you might see a breakout in one party's favor. These are parties that are fairly evenly divided in vote share, as have been for the last 15 years.
You know, I'll just end that with one, quote that Ajit Jogi gave to me when he spoke with me yesterday. He said, Raman Singh is born lucky.
Is it?
He manages to scrape through every time. Do go on BloombergQuint.com and watch that interview. Let's see if he is 4th time lucky. And that's what most of the pollsters are also saying. Let's come to Telangana. Telangana is also a very interesting one because the moment you had INC plus TDP, arithmetically they were ahead. But most pollsters seem to believe that KCR will pull through.
This one is interesting, right? Because the Congress was notionally with the TRS when Telangana was a state that for many of those years was a request or a demand that KCR had leaves the UPA, forms a government in the state. The TDP this is a bit of this would also be a state that's hard to poll.
Yeah.
Right? Because the TDP was with the NDA till 6 months ago. They've joined with the Congress now. So this whole, when parties that are inherently parties that have seen each other as rivals come together, I'd find it very hard for a pollster to find out if there's any voter transferability or not. So I'd say of the 5, this one's the tough one for any exit poll to get right.
No, but they stuck their necks out. And in fact, Axis My India is giving them 91 seats on the upper limit. KCR has 90 right now, but he won 63.
That's right.
So all of those were people he pulled out of TDP and Congress. Let's see if this happens. Telangana again close to call, but as of today, it seems like KCR's gambit of pulling the plug on his government 9 months early may have paid off. Mizoram. Let's come to Mizoram as well. We have 2 polls over here with predictions, and both of them show the Mizo National Front ahead, but not by a massive margin. You need 21 to form the government, and they may just cross through. The others will play a significant role here.
So this part, right, the MNF is a party that's seen aligned to the NDA.
Yes,
so,
but not in the state.
Fair enough. The narrative, if the Hindi heartland is protected, then, and if this one comes into the MNF, then the Northeast, the narrative will be, is free of the Congress, is what Amit Shah, Narendra Modi and other leaders will go to town saying, look, this is now a region that is in complete control of the NDA and would go on, as they would say, on the development model that they want to take it on. That's the one state that the Congress still has in the Northeast. Let's wind back to why this election in 5 different states in 3 different parts of the country is so important. So let's go back to those 5 key points and the points you made about this.
Yeah. You know, BJP leaders today will be having a very uncomfortable time right till the results are announced, because if they lose the Hindi heartland, then even some kind of a proxy gain in Mizoram is not going to cut it.
Exactly.
65 seats between Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan. They had 63 of them, 62 of them in 2014, and that's an important chunk in the context of 2019.
No, it's pretty much everything, right?
Yeah.
These are the states, along with Gujarat, and to an extent, UP, they did lose 5 seats. These are the 7 seats in UP. These are the states that they swept completely, all in Gujarat, all in Rajasthan, other than 2, all in MP.
We don't know if state votes will transfer, but the long and short of it is that whatever happens on result day, it is going to change the perception for both Rahul Gandhi and Narendra Modi.
Which is what had happened 5 years ago. When these were states that the BJP swept, you realize the extent of what was coming 6 months later. So as you said, and these are samples that different polling agencies, remember, these are samples that different polling agencies have put together that they think are representative of the electorate. You will find numbers coming in different bursts on Tuesday. Through that, you will see probably numbers consolidate over hours. So this is not necessarily an election that you get a clear trend on immediately, or immediately in the first hour or 2 on Tuesday. So keep watching Bloomberg Quint, and we have a special election page for you this time around, on which you'll be able to get your hold of some of that data, see what you want to see, and read a lot of in-depth analysis.
So do stay tuned, and we'll see you on Tuesday.